frass. What a beautiful word. Frass is invertebrate poop or insect poop. Now, I'd like to focus on how the ghosts of evolution are at play here. There's an extinct species in Central America that was co-evolved with the avocado tree. And ever since that species went extinct some years ago, maybe several thousand, that I believe was a tapir, a giant forest tapir, would eat the entire avocado fruit and poop it out. And it was the primary dispersal, or endozoochorion, which is the dispersal of seeds from within the intestines of mammals, has relied solely upon human farmers to mimic, right? To wrap that seed in a compost-rich package and insert it into the ground or onto the ground, and thus spread its genetics and its abundance. And I think this basic mechanism has been true for many primates, including we humans. Especially looking from the lens of the Pacific Northwest, also known as Salmon Nation, where we have something called the anadromous nutrient pump, where for thousands of years, hundreds of millions of salmon would fatten their bodies on seaborne minerals, possibly up to 64 trace minerals, and loaded with phosphorus and nitrogen, potassium, everything that a food forest needs to thrive. And humans and bears and eagles and foxes and raccoons and the entire food web would gorge upon this seaborne flesh and disperse it all the way up to the top of the watershed, where it would cascade down and fertigate an entire lush food forest. If you've read the book 1491, you'll get a really good story of how the Amazonian food forests were anthropogenic. And if you follow the biochar world, you'll learn how the terra preta soils of the Amazonian are some of the most, tractors driving by. The terra preta soils were some of the most abundant natural food forests, anthropogenically natural, I think, in the history of humanity. And still to this day, those soils are coveted in the Amazon rainforest for being so deep and lush and black and rich, in an area where in general, there's this carbon oxidizes very quickly. My friend Gerardo, who does a lot of indigenous ceremony in the desert Southwest, he tells me in a lot of their ceremonial sites, there will be a fire ring, and within walking distance of the fire ring, or might say within pooping distance of the fire ring, there's a circle of a food forest that of a concentration much higher than elsewhere. Why? Because for thousands of years, People have been walking out, pooping fruit seeds. And in our trace, being the intrinsically regenerative mammals that we are, we leave abundance. So I've been trying to mimic this, as have many other people. Thank you, Christina Bertea, for being one of my teachers around this work. This is a Airstream trailer for a client where I'm automating the fertigation into a subsurface food forest. So I'm applying modern technology and hygiene and sanitation guidelines to mimic this human natural heritage that we are all heirs of. So this is just a macerator box. So I'd like to use flush toilets. Only 2 weeks ago, my friend was bitten by a black widow on his bum, sitting on his compost throne. And I think flush compost toilets have a promising future. So that's the last of my slides. I think I'm going to leave it there and pass the mic over to my co-presenters, Cindy and Luc.
All right, so let's just get our screen shared here. Can everyone see our slideshow?
Yes.
Okay. Well, first off, thank you, Nick. That's great. And I'm inspired by the term intrinsically regenerative. I think that's perfect.
Well, we would like to talk about one of the systems that we adapted from this passion that we share with Nick, that the Watson Wicks. This is regenerative wastewater treatment system. We call it Pozo Verde. It actually started in Latin America, in Guatemala. And then we did some of more these experiences in Bolivia, where I come from. And yeah, we had some systems there. It was tough to introduce the system because people was very attached to what they knew, and nobody can blame them, right? It was somehow working, but then when we offered the system, there was always that uncertainty of like, if this is really gonna work, or like maybe I just stay with what I know. And so that was part of our process there with the system. But then we found actually a town in Santa Cruz, which is the east of Bolivia, where there is a very interesting community of locals and also some foreigners. And they received us with arms open, and they gave us the opportunity to install some of these systems.
A whole bunch, and we're heading back to install more soon. We're pretty excited about that. So this is just an overview of what we're going to go through. We're gonna skip over some of it quickly in the interest of time, but just to begin, who we are. So Cindy and I met studying environmental engineering. I came from Canada, Cindy came from Bolivia, and we met in Delft, the Netherlands, of all places, to start a master's in environmental engineering together.
So that was, I guess, our introduction to, I would say, like the scientific part of like wastewater treatment. And from there, we have evolved, and we consider that it's also important to have a connection with Earth. Some may say like a spiritual connection, or like a connection, really a personal connection, and to take responsibility of our waste. And there comes like the respect for earth, water, for life, that we are all part of this wonderful ecosystem, this planet.
And another aspect of our interest in these systems, in decentralized wastewater treatment broadly, and in our systems in particular, are the implications for community infrastructure. These are systems that allow families, neighborhoods, and communities to engage in self-determination. So they choose how their waste, I use air quotes here, how their waste is used, treated, and what, if any, productive use they want to make of it. And that, in addition to the benefits of decentralized systems, and that I'm sure you're all familiar with in terms of resiliency. So there's a lot of interest in our type of systems, which are a variation of Watson Wick's. We'll show you some details on them shortly. But there's a lot of interest from the bioconstruction community, people who make straw bale homes, people who make adobe homes in Latin America, and anyone who's interested in having their physical environment be an expression of their interests, their values, and their relationship to the earth. And so our systems that we work with are what we consider to be appropriate technology. That's a term we were introduced to by Lonnie Grafman, who does some great work. He's got a book called Catching the Rain. It's available free online. I can't recommend it highly enough. And so involved in this whole process, that, for some people, it is strictly a material balance. They want their house, their lifestyle to be as sustainable as possible. But with more and more people, you see the spiritual aspect to this. It is spirituality that motivates people in this path, or perhaps as frequently, the deeper they go into the materiality of it, they find the spirituality sneaking up on them around every corner.
Right. In a way, it's like their homes. And when I say their homes, it's not just like the house, it's like the gardens, it's like the whole realm where they inhabit becomes a representation of the human being. And so it's like treating these spaces is how they treat themselves. And so then there's, again, an important connection. How do we manage our waste?
And so our systems are meant to work with the natural cycles that we all learned about in science class back in elementary school. We all know the water cycle and how that works. And in our involvement with the water cycle, in terms of principles of what we want to be working with for more sustainable and more regenerative use of water, we want to be cycling that water as many times as possible. Clean water that comes to us from whatever the source, the more times that we can use it before returning it to the earth, the better. The nutrient cycles. So actually, we've got a slide just ahead to get into a little more detail on that. But our excreta, our feces, our urine, these contain the nutrients that are required for agriculture. And this is one big cycle that in the mainstream nutrient cycle, so to speak, is broken. And anything that we can do to close that cycle is beneficial. And also organic matter. So this is where carbon comes into it. Nick was talking about how much carbon is ultimately in our feces. And then we also need to consider the electricity that's used to treat that. And we're creating more carbon that's released into the atmosphere when we could instead be storing this carbon into the soil where it does the most good. And so got down at the bottom, sanitation, healing, salvation, because that was kind of my personal journey here, that it started with an interest in sanitation coming from strictly a scientific point of view. I found the numbers and the symbols of it fascinating. And as I explored this path, I got into personal healing, seeing things that came up in myself, responses that came up in myself, and prejudices, all the rest. We all have our journey there. And that leads to a spiritual path, a journey towards salvation, I hope.
And well, so just like to have a little bit of like what we consider the problem, right? And so as Luc was mentioning, we have like this open cycle where like we use something, then we dispose of it. And so then we start like all the resources, the extraction that we have, like nutrients, carbon, whatever it is, then it doesn't come back to earth to nurture, to foster more life, and so to continue to close the cycle, right? And so that's in the status quo, around the flushing toilets, where these nutrients are considered really like waste, that they don't have value. But our purpose with the system that we propose is that goes back to earth, like in the close look that you see on the right.
And I'll just like to add there that it's not the flush toilets that are necessarily the problem, as
Sure.
Nick alluded to. It's where it goes once you flush it.
Mm.
And so that's what we're about to get into. But I just wanted to draw your attention first to this part, the chemical fertilizers in the open nutrient cycle. So I think that most of you are probably aware that the nitrogen-based fertilizer that's used in agriculture is synthesized by burning natural gas, by burning a huge amount of fossil fuels to bring inert nitrogen out of the atmosphere and fix it into a form that's ready for uptake by plants. And so we spend a whole lot of fossil energy to get that nitrogen for our agriculture. And then when we excrete it, it goes to the wastewater treatment plant. We spend a whole lot more fossil energy, or perhaps not fossil energy, to treat that and put that nitrogen back into the atmosphere. And Nick actually used a great turn of phrase. He called that our society's schizophrenic relationship with nitrogen. And anything that we can do to close that is beneficial. There are similar dynamics at play with phosphorus and potassium, the other macronutrients.
And so we have the example of dry toilets. Those are a good example of how this closed loop works, how the nutrients through compost, they can go back to the soil, and that is going to give life to trees. And with a good usage, a good balance between excreta and litter, then these can be very effective. And also good insulation, it can be attractive, clean, it can be really valued, and so we propose the Pozo Verde as an alternative, even to dry toilets, because in the case of Bolivia specifically, unfortunately, dry toilets were they were installed, they were part of a lot of projects from NGOs. You could still find them there in some communities, but down the road they were abandoned because communities in rural areas, they also wanted the very shiny white toilets, because the idea of progress of what is good, where do you go to be in a good conditions, is to have the white shiny toilet. And so for that, we adapted the Watson Wick system for what we call the Pozo Verde, what we are gonna explain more next.
So the basic idea here is you've got your wastewater coming from the house, that's number one, and it flows into the decomposition chamber, that's number two here. And so in the decomposition chamber, this is where your solids are separated from your liquids. And, this is a warm, humid place where the solids slowly go composting aerobically. And as they decompose and the solid particles become very small and they get carried out with the water, they flow out through the side walls, which it's a filter on the side. You'll see some details to how that's made later. But they flow out into this biofilter. Now, we call it a biofilter. We construct this with sand, but the work is done by the bacteria who live adhered to the sand. That's what makes it a biofilter. And so this nutrient and organic matter rich water flows out into the biofilter. And here the bacteria, they start eating up all the delicious food in there from their perspective. And they break down the organic molecules. They transform some of the nutrients, they make them available for plant uptake, and they kill the pathogens. And so we have nutrient-rich water flowing out, the pathogens are getting cleaned up, the organic matter is getting broken down, and you have the plants on top. Here we have 4 trees, but in a practical example, actually we'll show you some pictures later, you're likely to see a lot more, a mix of trees, bushes, grasses. And they suck up the water. They suck up the water, they suck up the nutrients. The plants are the primary removal mechanism for water from the system. However, there's always the case that you can get a big storm and you can get a lot of rainwater. And so you need to make sure that the system is not going to get bogged up. You don't want it to become a swampy, soggy mess. And so you need to have a rainwater overflow. And the way that Tom Watson described this is that it needs to drain to daylight. This needs to drain clear. It can never clog. This is water that can run out into the gully. In Bolivia anyways, it can run out into the street. It's water that is perfectly inoffensive, although of course you can't drink it. And so the benefits of the Pozo Verde, why don't you take it?
Well, it's for one, has to do with hygiene, like there is no contact in the sense of like the work is done by the plants, by the microorganisms that live there. And since you don't need to pump it, then there is no need for like getting in there, to deal with any kind of flooding, for example, which in under good conditions it shouldn't happen, right? Because there is like the outlet that wouldn't allow that. And there is no pathogens really because like the microorganisms, as Luc said, they take care of them, and through the roots they do not pass. And so that's really a good effective system.
So let me just add that through the roots of fruit trees, they don't pass. We do not recommend cultivating
Right.
vegetables in our Pozo Verde.
To do horticulture, no. Right. And so in the productive use, yeah, you get to reuse water. You are in a way watering, and if you will, like you are fertilizing this green space that is your garden. And you, for one, you're saving time as well and money. And also you are storing carbon, you are carbon sequestrating, because this becomes a rich soil. At the end of its life, that space is going to be full of rich humus. And it's humus, sorry. Yeah, that's not, that becomes rich. And then yes, after like approximately 30 years of life, then you can move it to another place. But in the meantime, you are really like giving back life to the soil.
Well, and what you're left with will hopefully generations down the line be as, the soil that you're left with will hopefully down the line be as valued as the terra preta soil that Nick was talking about in the Amazon. This is building a really valuable, beautiful soil. That's your end product once the system comes to its end of life. So let's not spend too much time here, but this is just to show you that in the Bolivian context, it comes out significantly cheaper to install a Pozo Verde than to do a septic tank, plus the biannual pumping. And as you may know, if you don't pump a septic tank, your septic tank fails. And if you have a septic tank, get it pumped regularly. That's our word of advice here. The materials that are involved in it are simple materials that you can get in any hardware store at any small town in the world.
Yeah, and they can be really adaptable. Like we adapted what we found as like the model from the Watson Wicks to the local materials to what was available in Bolivia, and yeah, it worked fine.
And actually, just something to note is that by far the biggest cost item in one of our Pozo Verdes in Bolivia is our design fee, which, for it to make sense for us to spend our time on it, we need. But as we go, we teach it to people because any builder can design and build one of these systems. And so we're working to spread it that way. So here's the first case we wanted to show you. This is a single family home in Samaipata, Bolivia. And so it's a 25 square meter surface. And here's some pictures of the construction of it. So you can see this is the decomposition chamber that's being built. And the filter is made from hollow bricks that are stacked, the wrong way, not the way that you do them to build a wall in your house. Yeah. And then later on, you can see a little bit here that there's a layer of gravel that surrounds the bricks before the sand. And so you get kind of like three different pore sizes there in your filter. And just up next, we have a video that we want to share with you, but I realize that I need to enable the audio here. So just give me a moment. So this is 4 years after the installation of this system. The owner of the property made this video for us.
In case you didn't think there was beauty in solid waste, look at the size of the calla lilies that are growing in our first part of our tank here. My name is Bill Powers, and Luc and Cindy constructed this system. This is the first tank. There's the open kamara in this area here, and it's all coming from our house, which is way up there. You can see how far away it is. It comes through tubes, enters into the first tank. We put bananas here. They've died because of the winter time, but they were growing fine, these orange flowers. From there it comes to this sponge right here and then goes into this area. We never ended up planting fruit trees here. There's a couple of calla lilies and stuff that we put in here, but this has just become kind of a grassy area. And then that's it. And we've had the system for 3 years. There's never been any problems with it. Everything is working out great. As you can see over here, we're catching the rainwater from the roof into those two 5,000 liter tanks over there. But yeah, it's been a successful system as of now. We're very grateful, and we like it a lot.
So that was the first case study. So we're kind of flying through this in the interest of time. The second and final case study, this is for a small hotel in the same town. Here you can see the building process. It's so, the area of the biofilter and the area of the decomposition chamber change with the number of users that the system is designed for. And with this one, you can see that the inspection pipe is sticking way out of the ground. It doesn't need to be anywhere near that high. You can cut it off at knee height. The thing is, you just need to be able to find it, because this is how you monitor the health of the system. You need to be able to stick a stick down there, because if anything happens, anything goes wrong, for example, someone flushes 20 plastic bags down the toilet, that could clog it. And just by sticking a stick down this pipe, you'll be able to tell everything you need to know to find out what needs to be done to remedy the situation. And here's a little video on this one. It's in Spanish.
Hola, buen día. Soy Alex Fernández. Soy dueño de un hotel aquí en Samaipata, Santa Cruz, Bolivia. Tenemos un hotel para 15 personas, pero en promedio deben ser 10 personas que están más o menos viviendo acá. Y con Cindy y Luc hemos construido una cámara natural de filtración de aguas negras. Nosotros antes teníamos justamente aquí en esta zona el pozo séptico y el pozo ciego, pero era un problema porque olía, había que hacerle mantenimiento seguido, pero gracias a ellos que los conocimos, construimos este filtro natural que está justamente acá, ¿no? Ustedes pueden ver, está en esta área, mide 10 metros por 5. Sobre ello hemos, bueno, este es el filtro donde van a llegar todas las aguas negras. Las aguas grises las hemos llevado a otro lado, hemos hecho otros filtros más pequeños, pero con el mismo concepto. Pero aquí llega el agua de los inodoros de todos los baños que tenemos. Y les diré que funciona muy bien. Como ellos nos dijeron, hemos plantado, aquí es un platanal y tenemos también otro tipo de plantas con hojas anchas. Y funciona perfectamente, ya deben ser 5 años. No le hemos hecho ningún mantenimiento más que limpiar un poco lo de arriba. Uno puede caminar encima y no hay olor, no se tapa. Hemos verificado qué ocurre también en los alrededores. No hay una filtración, o sea que estamos muy contentos de este sistema. Gracias, Lucas, Cindy.
Oh. So we have probably a minute perhaps still to address the next steps here.
Well, so these are kind of like the pilots that we have installed in Bolivia. And so for us, as next steps is really to take it to a community level where we can integrate the systems and maybe like put together like in like a green area, common green area. And that would be really, really interesting to do. Additionally, we do need to get some characterization, quantification of the system, because so far we haven't been able to measure, like the nutrients, how, like when the water comes polluted, like what's the water quality when it leaves. I measure like by, like, just, we can say by eye, but not really like doing all the chemistry tests to really assure that that's happening. But yeah, so that's what we have in project right now, and we are in connection with some people and universities that are helping us with that next year. And so also part of like the project is to spread the word and to teach about this system to contractors, to albañiles that work. They're like building like septic tanks so that they can also be able to build these Pozo Verdes, and so that this is more available to the communities.
So thank you very much for that. And let's send it back to Nick.
Wow, thank you, Cindy and Luc. I loved seeing the testimonials and how beautiful our poop can become, and how happy the people are. Amazing. I really want to contextualize this work for a minute in the frame of global earth repair. In San Francisco Bay, many of you probably have not heard, but just a few weeks ago, we had a massive fish kill. We had ancient sturgeon. They live for hundreds of years and they get to be huge, and they were littering our bay's coastline by the dozens. And it's the same story all over the world right now. Most humans live in cities by the ocean, and we have 300 plus dead zones around these urban ocean interfaces and the major river deltas, where they become anoxic. Fish just die. And failing septic systems, according to our own EPA, are the second leading cause of eutrophication, aka dead zones, after excess nitrate runoff from agriculture. But I think, in California, supposedly we're leading the world with environmental policy. And we had a policy called AB 332 at the state level that mandated zero discharge from cities of wastewater. Because I think politicians and people are seeing the writing on the wall. Our sewage treatment infrastructure is fast becoming obsolete. They weren't designed for as many people. Back when they were implemented, the solution to pollution was dilution, and our oceans can just dilute all of our sins. That is no longer a relevant philosophy. What you're doing needs to happen not only in rural Bolivia, but in downtown San Francisco. And I think it may sound absurd to hear that and say that right now, but I think when AB 332 passes in its next round, it was shot down because our own sewage treatment, lobbyists shot it down. They don't want to have to redo the entire system. But I'll tell you what, pharmaceutical and personal care products, soaps and detergents, are not being treated by our sewage treatment plants. This is causing massive global ecosystem collapse. Beyond a shadow of a doubt, it's happening. It's just not being talked about. And what you're doing is the solution. And so I can't wait for your work to exponentialize everywhere. That, and we have an ecosystem restoration camps movement that is a low-tech nomadic. I think what we've been talking about here is more like permanent installations. And you, I appreciate you showed the dry toilet. And I think the arbor loo and the dry toilet can really be adapted for hygienic landscape scale restoration to restore weather and rain and climate patterns using humans. You know, we're going to have 150 million climate refugees coming in the coming years. That's inevitable. It's already happening. Refugees are being turned away at the shores of Europe. And let's restore the ecosystems using this regenerative sanitation. So I really want to save the last 10 minutes for participants to be able to interact with us and ask questions. But before we do that, I want to start us off with one question to the two of you. And this is a question I ask everyone. And it take a moment to think about it if you need to. It's a little bit personal and possibly difficult. But the question is, if you had a container garden with lettuce on your back doorstep, would you fertilize it with your own urine and eat that lettuce? And would you do that for each other's urine? And thirdly, would you do that with your neighbor's urine or not?
Well, my answer is absolute yes to 1 and 2. For the neighbors, I'm not so sure.
Actually in the same page. Yeah, I definitely, like, years back, if you would have asked me this question, I would have had no idea, like, or I would have been like horrified by the question, you know, be like, what? No. Now, yes. Yeah, I definitely would use it. I probably, like, with the knowledge I have, I would do some other tricks, you know, prepare my own fertilizer with my own pee, you know, and then use it. Knowing that I know what I eat, what I consume, and so that is what I'm, like, you know, releasing. With my neighbors, I have no idea. Like, I don't know, and so I wouldn't, I guess, take that risk.
But at the same time, anytime we buy produce from the grocery store, you know, it's a good chance that biosolids from the wastewater plant have been used on those fields.
Right, that's true.
Thank you. I would echo those sentiments. We have a question from the chat about what about biogas for human waste, and my short answer is yes, absolutely. In the tropics, the energy budget is more difficult on the temperate climates, but maybe you have a different answer.
You have more experience with biogas than I do. What would you say?
Yeah, like, I think definitely, like, it's great, like, especially because you can generate energy, you know, like you can use it for heating or cooking even, you know, and then you have also like another derivative that you can use as a fertilizer, the digestate. The thing is, it's a little bit of a more complicated system, you know, and I mean, it's not impossible, like, and there are very simple biogas systems that communities can use. But for, like, what we've seen, you know, I think the key is really to understand the community, like the target population that you are gonna, like, propose to, you know, like, it's important to know what their needs are. And so, like, for example, if they want to treat their waste, the wastewater, but also they have an issue with energy, then I guess biogas digesters are better, right? But in the sense of, like, the community of Samaipata, for example, our system was what they needed. It was completely, like, it covered all their needs, you know. And so it's really knowing what they need. It's not just like us taking, oh yeah, I know what you need, I'm just gonna install that, and I know everything.
I'd like to address Mahala's question in the chat. Absolutely, we can safely use urine on our compost heaps. However, there's something to be aware of, which is the carbon to nitrogen ratio. So if your compost heap is smelly, that's because there's too much nitrogen and not enough carbon. And adding urine will make that worse because you're adding a lot of nitrogen. So if your compost heap is smelly, or if you're planning on adding a lot of nitrogen-rich material like kitchen waste or urine, just make sure you balance it with carbon-rich material. Sawdust is a great example. Cardboard works, dry leaves, that kind of thing.
Great question. Yes, I like to pee on thick mulch around my plants, because then I'm getting my CN ratio. So I in that sense, I decentralize my compost. My compost happens all over my garden. Okay, we have another question. In US dollars, what does it cost to build Pozo Verde for 4 people?
$400. That's materials, labor, design, with us designing it. If you go to one of the contractors who we've trained up on it, he can do it for you cheaper. But that's in Bolivia.
Does that answer your question, Kathy?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So
I need to ask a question. How much water do you use, like per flush?
Depends on your toilet. There's low flash toilets. There's the old fashioned ones. That's the only factor.
Depends on the user. Yeah.
I've been living with flush composting toilets for several years now, and I like to use a lot of the marine and RV toilets that are around a gallon per flush. But it's funny because I'm also on rainwater, and because my compost toilet is also a fertigation system, and I'm trying to empty my rain tanks before the rains come. I'm like, I'm topping off my toilet bowl. I'm like, can I get 4 gallons in there? I'm trying to water my plant. So, yeah, like the site. That's why I love the regenerative metrics around effectiveness and not efficiency. I feel like we kind of get limited by just trying to be efficient sometimes, when effectiveness is often the more important question to ask.
I live on 6 acres, and we moved into a house that was built in 1958, and it has a septic system. And because of the septic system, I tend to I don't flush toilet unless it's brown. I put the toilet paper in the waste basket. And I just wondered if you do anything like that, or like I'm just trying to keep my septic system from having to be flushed all the time. And I just wondered, what in your system, do you just flush all this stuff into it and it just biodegrades, or I guess, I'm just trying to eliminate the waste that could be utilized otherwise. So thank you.
Well, so with the septic tank, the waste is in the form, comes from the pumping, right? They pump out the solids, and depending on what jurisdiction you're in, they do different things with those solids. Now, with an old septic tank, I think what you described, those are probably sensible precautions, because one of the biggest risks is if you get a huge load of water into your septic tank. It's quite dilute. That can wash out the bacteria that do the treatment, and so that's something to avoid. And then also by not putting toilet paper in, that should slightly reduce the buildup of the sludge, which is what needs to be pumped out. Now with our system, we design it so that you don't need to worry about that. We design it so that you put the toilet paper in, you flush it. The more you flush it, the more you water your plants. And really, someone who's designing a septic system for you today, right? Now, this isn't the case if you're buying an old house, but if someone designs a septic system for you today, they should design it the same way so that it'll take whatever you put down it.
And I'd love to add on to that. The septic microbiome is so fascinating. I mostly do gray water recycling, and the beauty of coupling gray water with separated black water recycling is that a lot of the soaps and detergents are designed to kill microbes. And so what I see in the world of septic pumping is that it's only necessary if your microbiome is weak. In a healthy septic microbiome, in a septic tank with a healthy microbial population, you're liquefying everything in a pretty short order. And I would say that includes toilet paper. I mean, of course, some toilet papers have a antimicrobial in the toilet paper, and like perfumes. And so it really like lifestyle choices make such a huge difference. It's also if someone's just eating preservatives in all their food, like Cheetos and Doritos. I mean, you read the label and there's preservatives in everything. Those preservatives are antimicrobial. So if you're just pumping antimicrobials into your system constantly, like I've seen dry composting toilets where you have like these perfectly mummified poo logs after years because the antimicrobials are just embedded in there. So yeah, it really, the personal is very relevant to how your septic pumpage is managed. So we got a link for the closing session when we're complete. Any final
There
thoughts?
is one there.
Yeah.
There's a question there from Christina. I see you raising your hand, Christina. Do you want to add something to it?
Yeah, so I think in the city, the limiting factor is how much square footage it takes outside to create the wetland area.
Yeah.
So how much room, say for one person, how much space would it occupy on the ground?
Well, so our design guideline is 5 square meters per person, which is 45 square feet. Now, we've never built a system for just one person because it needs to be able to accommodate visitors. So you design it for the peak use.
So for 2 people, say, what would it be?
Call it 100 square feet, 90 to 100 square feet.
Okay, great. And how much of that is the actual, how large is the brick enclosure?
Well, so we've never built one that small. Our minimum size so far has been for 4 users, but that's something that we would calculate. We've got our spreadsheet all set up to calculate the details of that, and we can talk about it afterwards if you like.
Okay.
Well, thank you, everyone.
Oh, there is something.
Oh, black soldier.
Black soldier flies are great. So are worms. Worms are also very effective at reducing pathogens. It's, all these things that should be in your compost heap, they do a great job of it, and which is part of why composting is a great solution.
Yeah, I've experimented with a black soldier fly compost toilet, and it was great during the hottest months of the summer in our temperate California. But again, if you want to get 12-month efficacy in the tropics, or you're doing an artificially heated chamber, but worms definitely in the winning invertebrate for a temperate.
Alternatives call today. I couldn't see.
So, so as far as customer acceptance, as we might say, you're using just about any standard flush toilet then, ideally a low flow, low volume flush. Is that the case then?
Or high volume, because it depends how much you want to water your plants.
Wow. Okay. And so, so you're finding that most of the objections then to compost toilets then fly out the window then.
Exactly, that's the benefit. Because on the user end, it's the same thing that they've always dealt with, perhaps just being more sensitive to the chemicals that they use to clean it.
So this is essentially like a septic system then. Very similar. Yeah.
Indeed.
except for we're not discharging below the biotic
Right.
zone soil. We're keeping it biotic.
Or polluting, yeah.
Yeah, it's got the benefits of the septic system without the drawbacks.
Yeah.
You know, with great benefits on top of it, right?
Yeah, a lot of, especially in like areas like Florida or Hawaii where you have volcanic or sandy soils, it's just like the septic systems are just functioning as like these nutrient time bombs. You're getting these massive nitrogen plumes just going down into, you know, underground rivers or into the ocean, like even really deep. And it's, yeah, but this whole notion that, you know, flesh it out of sight, out of mind is it's very anti-science, the way the conventional septic code is written. It's fear-based.
And then you're not supposed to plant trees on top of it.
Yeah.
How deep is the biofilter when you guys make these systems?
60
60
centimeters.
centimeters, yeah. It's not super deep.
Oh,
It's actually, it works,
Converting that to American, it's a little less
Oh.
than 2 feet.
right.
Mhm.
I remember we shifted to the metric 6 system in 1967.
Okay, everyone. Well, I see people are leaving. It's a few minutes past 2. I think the next, unless there's something super pressing, I think I want to say thank you to Luc and Cindy and everyone, and I hope to see you in the next session.
I have one thing I want to say, Nick.
Yeah.
That's a big concern to me. There seems to be a big push generally in the culture to demonize cattle and animals that are for, you know, meat producing, and supposedly some of the big companies envision a future with no farm animals, and yet we know that you know, animal poop is essential to regenerating soil. So we may be the animals that have to produce the poop that regenerates the soil if this movement that is really sketchy catches on too strongly. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks for.
Yeah.
I think the Marine Carbon Project showed that human manure composted can be applied at scale for great carbon benefit.
I'd just like to address the point from Robert in the chat there about the pre-legal situation. You know, we've actually we spoke with Nick about this. We've tended to operate on a don't ask, don't tell basis. But if you want to get this going on a bigger scale in big urban environments, then absolutely, there's some regulatory support that you'll need.
And for that purpose also, we are trying to get all the technicalities in the system, like trying to know water quality, soil quality, once the system is in place and before, you know, to compare. And yeah, that's the other like part of the next steps that we have in mind.
Mhm.
Yeah, because if you can show the lab results, that really takes the wind out of any objections.
Oh,
And any final closing thoughts, comments, questions?
have you guys heard about, there's a system that was popularized in Chile. I'm trying to remember the name of it. It begins with a T. It was a professor who developed a system that used macerated poop in liquid, and they sprayed it onto medium that had earthworms in it. Sounded like a really wonderful system, very, very compact. And then liquid kind of filtered through different layers of medium and came out, and then they treated it with UV and used it for irrigation. What was it called? Oh, Toha, the Toha system. No.
Okay, well, we'll take note of that. I don't know.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Check it out. Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you. All right.
Okay.
Well, our thanks again to everyone who showed up
Yeah,
and
thank you so
for all
much.
these questions. It's
Yeah.
great. Thank you for your interest in this. And we're happy to continue the conversation with anyone. We'll just leave our email address in the chat.
May all your poops blossom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Amen.
Where is your email address? Not here yet. There it is. Okay.
Bye, Nat.
Thanks, Nick.
Bye. Thank you.